Hello,
Yes,
hello.
sir. GM.
Yo, GM. Welcome everyone. Socket, Arcana, right? Make sure I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, that's pretty much
Beautiful.
right on.
And Zion, adoption through chain abstraction. Everyone, welcome. I'm glad to see some familiar faces here. Glad to be having the conversation, and I'm glad to be talking about chain abstraction today. I think you look at the sentiment analysis and kind of the trend lines. Chain abstraction is coming up quickly on as a hot topic, and what better people to have than Arcana and Socket to talk about it? So, starting in whatever order, you guys want to give a little introduction about yourself and then about the project?
Yeah,
Sure.
I yeah, Mayur, go
Yeah,
for it.
okay, I'll go first. Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Mayur. I'm founder and CEO here at Arcana. At Arcana, we like to think of ourselves as being in the business of abstractions. We've been in the space for quite a bit and helped like abstract away wallets, private keys with one of our earlier products, then with abstracted away gas through account abstraction, ERC4337 based products. And now pretty much in the thick of what of the chain abstraction world, and we're here to kind of help make this happen as soon as possible.
Awesome. Love
Awesome.
it.
Hey guys, Rishabh this side, one of the founders of Socket, leading everything on the business side of things. We've been here for quite some time, since like 2021. We started as a cross-chain protocol, and fast forward 2.5, 3 years later, we have been processing like more than $1.5 billion of volume every single month. We work with like applications in the space like MetaMask, Rainbow Wallet, Coinbase Wallet, OpenSea, Matcha, and many more. And a few weeks back, or a month or so back, we kind of like launched like evolution of Socket, where we wanted to push the boundaries even more and move away from cross chain, which kind of like still um, makes people realize about chains, or makes people kind of like anchored to chains a lot, and move towards chain abstraction, which is something that we'll talk about, and very excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course. And I think what better kind of group to have here for this? Yeah, as you kind of briefly mentioned this, but and I think a lot of the people listening obviously kind of know about chain abstraction, so we'll skip that. We'll skip what chain abstraction is. Why do you think, obviously crypto has been around
Get
for
into a definition war as well.
yeah, what is chain abstraction? It means the user doesn't fucking see anything. There we go, moving on. But like why do you guys think that after, I mean, more than 10 years, we're finally seeing this come to the forefront? Why do you think the space has struggled to break outside of this kind of like
Hey,
insular bubble?
can you guys hear Burn? Hear Banksy? I'm
You
Yeah,
able
can't
to
hear
hear
me?
him.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. It was me then.
Oh, can you hear me now, dude?
Yeah, I can.
All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, super simple. I mean, just wanted to kind of beg the question of like, why do you think the space has struggled to break outside of the kind of current insular state that it's in for so long? Mio, do you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. I have a take on this. So I think it's a couple of things. One is I think for the longest time, like purists, more tech savvy, like the more technical guys were in charge of even the interfaces for the longest time, I think. And that sort of led to the kind of interfaces we have as of today, and which obviously have like the sharp learning curve, but obviously, like nerdy solutions and nerdy interfaces built by nerds, and which works. But as you can all see, there's just a trickle in terms of like the actual user adoption into the space. So that needs to desperately change. And I think the other major reason is that over time we've kind of figured out in the space that most users don't really care about many of these very nerdy things or largely philosophical things that like apps in the space have to offer. And then as a consequence, then people are like, fuck it, just So I think that's probably my take on why this is a thing today.
Rishab?
Yeah. So I think like just taking or talking about this historically, right? Like I think like makes a lot of sense in the sense like so. For example, we started off with Bitcoin. Um, Bitcoin was super expensive, of course, to kind of like transact with. But it kind of like had like these brilliant use cases, has these brilliant properties, right? And then we kind of like extended those properties with Ethereum, and from like just let's say just the transfer side of things, we kind of like opened up a lot of things with EVM where anyone could do or like like write contracts and kind of like build any kind of primitives or financial primitives from like DeFi or like NFTs or whatever that is. On top of that, on top of EVM basically, right? And now, like once we had EVM, the thing was it was like super expensive. It was still super expensive, right? So we kind of like solved one problem, which was expanding the set of utilities or the use cases that we could kind of like um, work on. And but we still had this issue where it was super expensive. So it became better. It became more open, where like more users could come in and kind of like use Ethereum, but it was super expensive, so it still restricted a lot of users, right? And then more chains came and like more roll-ups came and everything like that happened, and then we're into this paradigm that we have today, right? Like where we have so much roll-ups and we have so much block space, so things are becoming cheaper and cheaper, right? Like things are becoming more usable, right? Like earlier, I don't think like like people, for example, in countries like India could afford like a $10 or $50 transaction, but now the transactions kind of like costs have come down to cents. It still needs to go lower in some cases, but it's really coming down. And now as we have this uh, these so many chains and so many L2s, I think like the problem kind of like has become okay, how do I end up using an application? How where like like how does a user really navigate this space? And even like use the application for once, right? I was just helping a friend onboard onto crypto, and like I realized how unintuitive this is for them, right? Like how do they really think about okay, how do I transfer my money from a centralized exchange to even my wallet, right? Like, or how do I kind of like onboard into a wallet? And now like I'm on this wallet, how do I use like this application which is on something called Polygon, right? I don't even know about anything. I just wanted to use that application, right? So yeah, I think like there's just like a lot of friction that remains, but I think like we've kind of like solved a lot of the core problems of cost, and the usability aspects that or the use case aspects that existed, right? And now it's basically about how do we make this all more usable.
No, I think we all can kind of sit here and completely agree. I think as we kind of look at it, are you guys both familiar with the Frontier Tech's framework?
Yeah.
What are your overall thoughts? Is there anything that you guys, whether it's your position in the cake framework or your overall opinion of the cake framework, do you think it is good as an encompassing figure of chain abstraction, or do you think there's more or less to be desired?
Yeah,
Either.
I think like um, my take on this is like I think like it is an extremely high level framework where like a lot of like categorization um, is basically done into like these layers, right? Like, but it's like extremely high level. Um, it's extremely high level sort of a categorization which kind of like makes sense at a high level, but like once you zoom in there's like a lot more to be like broken, and there's like a lot more layers into it, right? So at a very zoomed out level, I think like it makes like a good effort to kind of like put everything together, but there's like a lot of more layers to it, and like
Hmm.
the cake kind of like is like split vertically into a lot of pieces.
Yeah, definitely. Maya, what about you?
Yeah, most definitely. I think devil will be in the details. There's lots of nuance to it, but I think it's a great starting point to try and understand what is happening and who are the different actors. But I do believe, like many people who are attempting to like build solutions for chain abstraction will actually cut across multiple layers within that stack, and at least to start with. And then I think eventually people will realize, oh, these guys do solving better, or this is better for settlements, then they'll just plug into it and become more composable over time.
Nice, nice. And then I guess like, do you kind of take your own interpretations to it, Mayar, or is that something that you can kind of see being the actual, I guess, standard or framework for as we all move forward?
I mean, we honestly at our end we take it as a way to kind of like explain to others who don't know as well. Like, okay, so this is how like stuff flows, and these are good separations of concerns for different parties. Like a developer, like the user only needs to be concerned with what app they want to use. So that's the app layer, and then the app layer, that's the apps on this layer, only need to be concerned with like say the permission layer, and they don't need to worry about what's like further down the stack. And then like the permission layer guys, whoever they may be, will then be like, oh, okay, so who do I use for solving? And then the solvers are like, oh, how do we do all of this in a capital efficient way, and settle between ourselves, uh, and so it's good separation of concerns. But again, like I very strongly feel like, there'll be many people who want to kind of do a certain part of, uh, like say the solving part of it in a more efficient way, and they'll attempt it. They may fail or they may succeed, but it's like a general lack of standard, right? It's all brand new. So I think
Yeah, of
over a
course.
period of time it'll like settle, but I think everyone's going to have a right crack at it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think something that I always like to ask, and I think it can probably relate to this a little, but like, what is your hottest take within this kind of, whether it be the ecosystem as a whole or something specific to general? Oh, sorry, yeah, the cake framework or chain abstraction. What's your hottest take? Ushav, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I think my take is that we should, like, every app should not just have one chain. They might probably have multiple chains within the same app, right? So
Nice.
I think, like, while people are like fighting about, hey, like, why does every app has, like, like one chain? I think like they might have like multiple chains, right? And that's what Web2 really kind of like does for us, right? Like every app does not run on one server. They have actually like different server instances which like with their own specializations, which kind of like come together to form that app, right? Like so, instance of like for example, a Netflix, right? Like there's like one server that might store the content, one server that might store, let's say, the images of the content, or like render the UI. One server that might really give the suggestions on what all things to really like show in the UI, and things like that. And all of these microservices basically come together to for us to basically, for us as Netflix, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's where we will move, right? Where a bunch of chains will have act as bunch of different servers for an application, but for a user, it'll just be an application, right? Like they don't have to really care about any chains.
Love that idea. And how do you like? I guess how do you see that? Like, is that completely agnostic? Is that like more on the app chain thesis? Is that more on like an integrated thesis with kind of like subnets, if you would? How do you kind of envision that?
Yeah, I see it as chain abstraction thesis,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Thanks.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, really, it is chain abstraction, right? Like, because
Hmm.
ultimately for user, like for me, like, what's the end game for us, right? Like, the end game is a mix of all of these theses. I think first, where like one, the application, the user just really cares about the application. That's about it, right? Like, but under the hood, there are multiple things and multiple trade-offs possible. So, for example, like the whole subnet, or like this whole ecosystem thing that's coming out, right? Like ZK Sync has its own Elastic thing, and then like Polygon has its own ag layer. So the bunch of chains that our application uses might be just from one ecosystem, and let's say have like one shared sequencer, right? Another integrated approach might, for example, be that these chains might be different based on, let's say, a CDK and a ZK Sync and a OP stack chain, but they still have a shared sequencer, which is like a custom shared sequencer across them, which kind of like does all of this, right? So, to be honest, I'm not sure how it evolves, but I'm very curious about how this all turns out.
Nice. What about you, Mayor?
Um, my hottest take is probably that everyone in the space, and I think I suspect that we ourselves are also complicit in this when we say any chain, any token, right? I don't think that'll happen. Um, I think
Interesting.
people, yeah,
Well,
I
what do
feel
you
like,
think?
yeah, so I just, it's just this thing, right? So where we're already at this place where we are saying, oh, we're treating USDT across different chains as
Hmm.
like fungible in this chain abstracted world, but they are not really fungible. Like the
Hmm.
different chains have different sort of like trade-off, security, all sorts of different things, which all affects like pricing end of the day. And this, I think, is going to be even more true of when you want to kind of afford for, like, say someone launches their brand new token and they want, users to be able to kind of use their token as gas on their chain or their app or their app chain or whatever. And
Hmm.
then I think, as a consequence, many people, many of the chain abstraction solutions will actually find it hard to support that, or it'll just be too expensive.
Hmm. Interesting. And so, like, what about like the concept where like everything's kind of denominated in dollars? Do you see that kind of, like, I know you mentioned like USDT across all chains, although it's not like using, let's say, Ethereum on Solana. Do you think that there's going to be like a layer above which is saying, hey, like there's Ethereum here, oh, sorry, there's USDT here, USDT here. Doesn't really matter where we are. Let's just use USDT. Or are you saying,
Yeah, I mean, so Aglayer, for example, promises like full fungibility of say an ERC20 like USDT
yeah.
across multiple chains, right?
Mhm.
That may be true. I'm not 100% sure, but as of today, I think it's very clear why bridges have gone down this direction of slowly onboarding chains one by one, and needing for everything to needing that sort of atomic composability, like you uh, like you lock and mint, or you burn and mint whatever based on what your bridge design is. But here, very clearly, in chain abstraction world, you're saying, hey, this solver, he'll front the liquidity and we collect on the other side, but they may not be the same. And that, I think, will be a problem unless someone like, say, maybe an Aglayer actually delivers on that promise.
Nice. I think that's a very, very fair tip. What do you think about that, Rishab?
Yeah, um, I think like chain abstraction is about creating the right layer of abstraction, right? I think like the difference between all of these, let's say, versions of USDC or USDT is that they have different security properties, right? So as long as the user could be made aware about the security properties that they're opting into, uh, I think it's okay, right? Like I don't think they really need to care about the underlying chains or anything like that, right? Like all they need to care about is if I have like a position in Aave, like what are the security assumptions that I'm kind of like opting into, right? Like, and it might include like Aave smart contract risk plus the USDC or USDT risk or any other risk that kind of like comes as a part of the system, right? So as long as we can kind of like create the right abstractions, either at a user, like, like at the interface level, layer or whatever have you, I think like this problem could be kind of like mitigated in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, and I think as we kind of go into the future with kind of both of these ideas, like, and I guess independently, like Arcana and Socket, where do you see yourselves being in 5 years? Shab, you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. I think like for us, from like an ecosystem standpoint, I think like we really see ourselves as like we were talking about this whole chain abstracted layer where applications kind of like become the hero, right? Like not anyone else. Like where users are coming in, the chains still play like a huge role, right? Like along with Socket, where they kind of like where everything, all the execution is really happening at a chain level. Um, but the application is the hero, right? Like user is directly interacting with the applications which are built on Socket, and Socket kind of like acts as like this chain abstraction layer for to handle like all the on-chain execution on behalf of the application, right? And yeah, that's what we are building towards.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah, 5 year or horizon. I'd say we'll almost certainly still just keep focusing on the user experience and the developer experience. That's the sort of layer we want to live on, because I think that's our strong suit. And I see us like composing with, like, say, the likes of Socket for ensuring users get the best rates on their fee auction protocol, and composing with, settlement layers, solver layers, that that are in the space, like the Everclears of the world, and just making sure like the experience on the user end is like it's top notch.
Love that. Love, and I guess, as you guys kind of both work at your respective companies, what got you on this path of abstraction? Like, why do you, through the ups and downs of the markets, what keeps you here? Mary, you want to start it off?
Yeah, actually, we started working on this idea. We I like back in the middle of last year, and we honestly didn't know what to call it, so we were calling it Arcana Credit, because we kind of drew analogies with credit cards, like
Love
saying that
that.
you have funds somewhere. Yeah, I know exactly. You have the funds. Why can't you spend it? And I started pitching this idea to like traders and all sorts of people, and the most of them like couldn't even get it, and said, "How is this possible? Why like how why can I not see what chain I'm on? And what do you mean I don't need
Yeah, what do you
gas?"
mean?
Yeah, yeah, and so all of those sorts of things, and but somehow it intuitively felt right. It felt like natural progression for us. Like basically, we got people. We like with our wallet abstraction product, we got people from from landing page to home page. With gas abstraction, you get them from say home page to checkout, and now you actually get them to pay, right? So this seemed like natural progression for us, and glad to see that eventually people have given it a name that we can all like get behind. There's this chain abstraction meta now, which is obviously, like you said right at the top, it's gaining tremendous steam, and it's going to be quite the thing, at least this cycle. And yeah, that's why we're here. We feel like it can be extremely valuable to people and actually hopefully result in real mass adoption.
I agree. Shab, what about you?
Yeah, I think for us, like in the last 3 years, we kind of like worked at this both protocol and application layer, right? And with specifically on the cross-chain side of things, right? And um, the core problem kind of like still remained like I was saying, right? Like where we kind of like had the scalability now, but like how do we kind of like solve this fragmentation problem? And we really thought, okay, like cross-chain is the solution. Um, and what we realized basically was it's not, right. Like Rostin still exposes the users and the developers to a lot of the same problems that we meant out to solve, basically, right. And 3 years later, we kind of like had some progress, but there was not like like 10x progress, right. Like it was all incremental, right. And what we kind of like realized was we need like a new lens to think about the problem. And like while we were thinking about the protocol, like our protocol evolution, we kind of like thought, oh yeah, something like like chain abstraction was like a feature of the core protocol, and what we realized was that was the thing that was really missing, right? So yeah, I think like we kind of like then double down on it, and yeah, I think like our end goal kind of like still remains building for developers at a protocol layer, and kind of like solving this broader fragmentation issue in the space, and really kind of like pave the way to for like millions of rollups to exist.
No, I mean, and I love that because I think, especially as we kind of like look at, I mean, you've seen it many times before. You kind of started with the quote unquote app chain thesis, which then moved to like the modular thesis, and I think either way, it's really exciting because I think the way that we kind of all look at this, especially after this 30-minute informative call, is that it doesn't matter, right? And being able to kind of build products is the only thing that matters, and I think as an industry, we don't survive without that. Um, but as we kind of come up on time, I want to give you guys the opportunity. Mayor, you could start, but just any last remarks you want to tell the people at home? How can they stay connected? Anything exciting coming up?
Yeah, sure. So we are actually going to be doing like a quick demo app. It's like a precursor to our testnet. This should be coming up fairly soon. We'll actually show it in the form of like a wallet interaction with a real
Nice,
application,
nice.
and that should hopefully come out as early as next week. We are hoping, fingers crossed. But yeah, that's the big thing that we have to that people can look forward to. Following that is of course our testnet later this quarter. And yeah, before we eventually end this, you can go ahead and ask Rishabh for his final thing. But Banksy, I really want to know what is yours like hottest take in the space, because you definitely seem like someone who has a bunch.
I have a lot of hot takes. I have a lot of hot takes in this space. I think my hottest take on I'm gonna say chain abstraction is that it is fuck.
Not real.
Yeah, yeah, kind of, right? Like I think it's a great idea, right? And I think it's awesome to have a North Star, but I feel there's and it's great. Like obviously to have more people working towards the idea of not being able to see the blockchain is the end goal. And I think a lot of it becomes extremely self-serving, and kind of I don't want to say unrealistic, but I think self-serving and kind of fluffy as we kind of get to like the concept of it being a narrative. And you see this with a lot of narratives as soon as they pop up, right? Like there's a goal, there's an idea, and there's a very core group of people. And I am excited, I'm very happy to obviously kind of be on stage with our kind on socket, which I do think that you guys are definitely like leading the charge with chain abstraction, like we all are together. But you're gonna see a lot of people coming out like, and I think being able to like discern, hey, this is actually kind of falling into this chain abstraction narrative versus we're just kind of riding the coattails of it. You got to come to expect it. It of course means success, but it also of course will lead to negative connotations. And I think you kind of saw something similar with like modularity, and then it eventually means nothing, and then eventually you kind of see this in crypto a lot. Like you saw tokenized securities then becoming synthetics, then becoming RWAs, and I think you're kind of seeing this with chain abstraction. Um, but I think the issue with chain abstraction is you take old account abstraction, you take bridging, you take intents, you take um, uh, pretty much anything can now fall under chain abstraction, right? Because it's like let's just have interop. But yeah, so my hottest take is that I love the North Star, but it's getting a little fluffy. But yeah, so I appreciate you asking me that. Rashad, you want to send us off with some remarks on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like chain abstraction kind of like generally as we kind of like work towards this goal, I think like we kind of release something called Magic Spend plus plus, which allows chain abstraction to kind of like natively come in
Mm-hmm.
at like a wallet layer basically, right? Like what it means is you will have one single balance, like you just have like USDC which you can use anywhere basically, right? Like and instantly it's like literally a single chain experience, and that's like the end goal that we've been talking about, right? So we have like various teams implementing that on top of socket, so expect a demo of that soon. There's like a lot of things that we are going to share
Nice.
about like how we work, like how socket works, and like MOFA. So stay tuned on that, and if anyone's coming to ECC, keep your eyes out. We'll be there and would love to catch up.
Mayo, are you going to be at ECC?
Unfortunately, not me, but
Oh,
the people
no
from the
worries.
team.
Well, we gotta get a socket, Arcana, and Zion photo, and we're all there together. Awesome.
Yes,
Well,
yes, for sure.
thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone for coming. Mayor, Rashab, Socket, Arcana, thank you so much. This is awesome conversation. I know we're gonna have so many more. And keep on working towards something awesome. I'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great one. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye bye.